My fellow citizens of the world and my fellow Ugandans, my fellow indigenous Ugandans. Today, as usual, I am going to be discussing the situation in Uganda. Of course, as also it relates to other parts of the world, because as we know, no man is an island. I'm going to discuss I'm going to discuss 3 points. And of course, it's all going to be about Uganda and the political instability that has been going on in Uganda for 35 years. As I've informed you, this channel is going to be addressing issues in Uganda and requesting all the citizens of the world, and particularly in Uganda, to pay attention to what is going on in my beloved country, Uganda. The 3 points I'm going to discuss are Magufuli and Museveni pipeline agreement, the decapitation of a child head by another child. That's what is going on in Uganda. That shows you the level of instability and the level of genocide that has taken place and might be even planned to take place again by the same culprits. I'm also going to discuss the Rukutana shooting during the elections, not even between opposing sides, but within the Rwandese-run NRM group, which I refer to as the National Rwandese Movement, because it was really made up by the Rwandese Tutsi refugees who decided to go to the bush and deceive the entire country that they were going to fight against dictatorship in Uganda and end dictatorship once and for all. Instead, they were a bunch of criminal Rwandese Burundian Tutsi refugees who had all along been planning to take over the government of Uganda. Unfortunately for Uganda, they took advantage of our hospitality and took advantage of the political instability in the country to start a fake anti-dictatorship bush war, where they imposted as indigenous Ugandans, deceived many of the indigenous Ugandans who wanted to see dictatorship over in Uganda, told those people that they were going to start a war to end dictatorship. Unfortunately, their plan was to take over the government of Uganda. In other words, usurp the government of Uganda and use it as a stepping stone to go back to their original country, Rwanda, invade it, create another form of deception about a genocide that they instigated by having shot down the plane of the president of the majority Hutu government in Rwanda and the majority Hutu government in Burundi. So we see a situation that has been ongoing for the last 35 years, actually longer, because we are counting from the time they came to power. We're not looking at the time in 1981 when they started the fake anti-dictatorship bush war. I wish to always remind people that are new to this program, Truth to Free Africa, to remind them about how this situation has come up in Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo. In Uganda and the rest of the Great Lakes region, we are very unfortunate to have the Hitlers, Mussolinis, and French Vichy government types of, in Uganda and the rest of the Great Lakes region, we are very unfortunate to have the Hitlers, Mussolinis, and French Vichy government types in Africa that have not been tried for crimes against humanity. It never stops to amaze me as to how Britain, Israel, and America, former administrations of Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr., and Obama, how they could have outsourced and covered up the genocide of over 15 million indigenous Ugandans and Congolese by the Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugee puppet usurper dictatorship in Uganda. But what is interesting and sad is they played up the Rwanda genocide, which was instigated by their puppet Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugee usurpers of Uganda government when they invaded Rwanda and shot down the plane of the majority Hutu presidents of Rwanda and Burundi. Okay. It's sad because we see Museveni, Kagame, and Kabila, their child prodigy. These are people who lived in Uganda for many years, learned the language, and adopted even the local names of Uganda, with the exception of Kabila, who, because they wanted to use for another reason, he adopted his stepfather's name, who had married his mother, a Tutsi woman. So these people, together with the British and former American administrations, with Israel, they managed to kill over 15 million indigenous Ugandans. Over 15 million indigenous Ugandans and Congolese by having first taken over the government of Uganda, and Kagame having been the chief of Ugandan military intelligence, was sent to invade Rwanda. And after they invaded Rwanda, caused the genocide in Rwanda, which was blamed on the government of the Hutus, which they had invaded. Of course, many of them partook in the genocide as a reaction to the invasion. But we also know that the Rwandese Tutsis who had come from Uganda, backed by Ugandan military, Britain, and the Clinton administration, these people committed genocide against the Hutus. And it's said, in fact, as you might have heard during one of the BBC broadcasts, where Kagame reacted by, I think, expelling BBC from Rwanda. It's reported that more Hutus died than the Tutsis in the Rwanda genocide altogether. Yet they used this excuse in the Rwanda genocide to invade Congo, and their whole goal was to follow the Hutu refugees and kill them in the forest of Congo. We learn about 2 million Rwandese Hutus who had run away from the genocide in Rwanda were killed in the forest of Congo. And then, after they were killed, Museveni and Kagame invaded Congo, took over Congo. There's nothing to hide about this invasion, because one of the commanders who had come from Uganda ended up being the ruler of Congo for a few weeks or a month. until they brought in Kabila from Uganda, who was married to a Tutsi woman, and set him up as the new president of Congo. But the plan all along was to usurp Uganda government, usurp Rwanda government. I say usurp even Rwanda because they are minority. Through normal elections, through normal democratic process, the Tutsis could not just be the leaders for over 20 years in Rwanda because they are a minority. They've only been in power by having played up the genocide that was committed in Rwanda by both groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis. Both committed genocide on each other. And mind you, the Rwandese Tutsis who had taken over the government of Rwanda were the same Rwandese Tutsis of Kagame and Museveni who had deceived indigenous Ugandans, taken over the Ugandan government through deception, and usurped the government of Uganda. So we see this same group, they go to Rwanda and play the same tricks of always blaming the third party. And after that, they go to Congo. Apparently, Congo, they had nobody, where they tried to blame Mobutu for having supported the Hutu government or for having allowed the Hutus to run to Congo. They claimed these were the ones who had committed genocide. Of course, there were some of those who had committed genocide together with the Rwandese Tutsis from Uganda, who committed genocide in Rwanda, had run to Congo after being defeated. That kind of makes sense. They ran to Congo. But instead of going there and looking or fighting those who were armed, BBC and all information that we got, the Rwandese Tutsi refugees from Uganda, Museveni and Kagame, went into the jungles of Congo and committed genocide on 2 million Hutu refugees. It's sad that after having committed genocide of the Hutus, they also invaded Congo. They had a complete invasion of Congo, took over the government of Congo, looted Congo, and killed over 6 million indigenous Congolese people. So it's these people, the same group of Museveni and Kagame that took over the government of Uganda, that are in Uganda still killing indigenous Ugandans. By now, it's estimated that up to 5 million indigenous Ugandans have died. Some say 3, but by now, the kind of killing that has been going on, people are estimating that about 5 million Ugandans have perished in a Holocaust that the British, American former administration and Israel have covered up, also stopped the UN report, which would have exposed Museveni, Kagame, and Kabila for the genocide in Congo. To the sadness of all Ugandans, it was Uganda that was found guilty, not even Kagame, but Uganda was found guilty of having been responsible for the looting and genocide in Congo, whereby Uganda was judged for $10 billion to pay to the Congolese people. This is a terrible injustice. And I think every indigenous Ugandan should be concerned about how that judgment came about. I've always been disturbed as to why there have been no indigenous Ugandans to come out with, I'm sure they are very capable indigenous Ugandans. I've heard there are many indigenous Ugandans even here in America, not many necessarily, but quite a number of them who are millionaires in America and even in other African countries. So you'd think that these indigenous Ugandans who would be patriotic to try and help fight this case, even before Museveni goes out. Because we don't want future generations of Ugandans to be blamed for genocide that indigenous Ugandans were not responsible for. And in fact, we were victims of the British and former American administration, Israel, genocide, which they had outsourced to their Rwandese, Burundian Tutsi refugee puppets. This disturbs me, to know that of all indigenous Ugandans in diaspora, there's no indigenous Ugandan paying attention to these serious charges against our country. We are victims. We have lost up to almost 5 million people. How come the Americans, the British, and the Israelis were not judged for the genocide in Congo, and in fact genocide in Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo? It's these countries that supported a very insecure Rwandese, Burundian Tutsi refugee group that doesn't even feel they're black. These individuals were brainwashed to think by the Belgian colonialists to think that they're white. And as I've already informed you, these Rwandese Tutsi refugees now have stretched it to saying that they're Jews. Henceforth, we see Israel, the racist Israeli prime minister, who called African refugees a cancer, against one of his ministers or himself, called African refugees, only 60,000 African refugees, a cancer. We saw him come to Uganda. We hear Israel having even marijuana farms in Uganda. Helping a group that has committed genocide on almost 5 million indigenous Ugandan citizens. Where is justice? Yet these are the same countries which keep telling us never again. I am going to keep repeating this information during my presentations to make sure the world comes to an understanding of a Holocaust that went on in my country. We've lost close to 5 million people because of British and former American administration support and Israel support for a Rwandese Tutsi refugee group that we helped and sheltered during the time of need. It's very sad because they have brought in Uganda a culture of violence. A culture of violence. For 35 years, they have forced children to kill people. They have trained children as child soldiers. In fact, during the war, before they used up the Uganda government, the fake dictatorship Bush war, they took people's children after killing them, trained their children as child soldiers. How can the world keep quiet about this sort of injustice? How is this possible? It saddens me to know that countries that tell us never again are the ones supporting and outsourcing genocide of innocent Africans to their Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugee psychotic killers. I call these people psychotic because they lived among Ugandans. We helped them. I saw them as a young man come to my country. And yet these are the people committing genocide on those people who helped them. I am very disturbed by listening to information about Kagame being repeated that Kagame has helped Rwanda develop, Kagame has helped Rwanda develop, Kagame has developed Kigali. But people failing to realize that Kagame is a genocidary. If we were in a perfect world, Kagame should be tried for crimes against humanity. So should Museveni, so should Kabila. But because these people are backed by world powers of America, Britain, and Israel, these people are being left free to rule countries where they've committed genocide, continue to haunt the citizens of Uganda and Congo. It's a disgrace. Yet we see in Europe, when Hitler, Mussolini, and the Vichy government killed Europeans, there was an outcry from the Europeans. The Europeans went even galvanized the entire world to fight against Germany. Some African under British colonies even went to fight. Even African Americans here under Jim Crow laws went to fight against the Germans. Because the Europeans told the whole world Germany was a bad government. Hitler was a Nazi. Hitler was a genocidary. Up to today, we are told about how horrible Hitler was, how he killed 6 million Jews, and how he killed the gays and all the other people, Germans even, he considered incapable of being productive in the German economy. How he killed those people. Yet these governments, America, Britain, and Israel, continue to support the Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugee. Minority, by the way, a minority, to kill their fellow Africans. Even though these guys, in their mind, they've been brainwashed to think that they're white people because of their straight nose, having been brainwashed by the Belgian colonialists. The reason Israel is gone to Uganda, we saw Benjamin, the same racist leader of Israel, who called his government called Africans a cancer. We've seen our people, in African people, being harassed in Israel, being called even the N-word. This same man went to Uganda and met with this genocidary usurper dictator of the Ugandan government. All because they can steal Ugandan minerals, gold, diamond, oil, use Ugandan agricultural land for producing food for themselves. But it's still evil. I'm sure Hitler wanted all those things. That's why he wanted to take over the whole world. Yet the whole world rose up against Hitler, Mussolini, and the Vichy government for the atrocities in Europe. We see history, the same history repeating, a similar history repeating itself in Africa, except by Africans. Unfortunately, these Africans don't even think they're black because of European brainwashing. And now they're claiming to be Jews, not even knowing who Jews are. I wish they could read the Bible. In fact, the Tutsis are far from being Jews. If anything, they are Hamites. If anything, even if they were Jews, what they have done is against the Creator Almighty of heavens and earth. Because they came to Uganda, we sheltered them, and they turned around and committed genocide. If the Rwandese Tutsis know the history of even the Bible that they claim to know, they should remember the history of Saul and how the Jews were punished for Saul and how they had killed other people and how they were cursed for their sons to pay the sins of their fathers. So Rwandese Tutsis can play up this Jewish thing as long as you have killed indigenous Ugandans, innocent indigenous Ugandans that help you at your time of need. Rwandese Tutsis, whether you're Jews or not, you're still doomed. I can assure you. You cannot kill innocent Ugandans and think that claiming to be Jew and working with Israelis to continue killing indigenous Ugandans, or working with the British, not working with the Americans, because right now, President Trump, I think, has said, well, not I think, he promised that he was not going to help dictatorship in Africa. So working with Israel and Britain, you are not going to succeed, Rwandese Tutsis, for the crimes against humanity that you've committed against innocent indigenous Ugandans whose families sheltered you, whose families educated you. And unfortunately, you are now killing Ugandans. I've made appeals to the Rwandese Tutsi refugees to have a change of heart, especially the youth, to stop supporting Museveni. Stop supporting Museveni and your fathers and your relatives that are still in Uganda committing genocide on indigenous Ugandans. impostering as indigenous Ugandans, trying to continue ruling Uganda in their confused mind, in their convoluted mind. They think that they can create a Tutsi empire out of murdering innocent indigenous Ugandans and Congolese. I can assure you, Rwandese Tutsis and Burundian Tutsis, this is not going to succeed. You will not succeed by claiming to be Jews. You will not succeed to take over Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo, and now, as I know, South Sudan. Because that's your plan, your Tutsi master plan, your Tutsi 50-year master plan to take over the region. It will not happen. We see all efforts being made by Museveni to stay in power. Even when he has ruled Uganda for 35 years, he's killing the young indigenous Ugandan people power supporters, jailing them, torturing them, all in the hope that he's going to stay in power after 35 years. We see recently Museveni and Magufuli signing an agreement for a pipeline and giving Tanzania more of the pipeline profits than to Uganda, the country where the oil is originating from. We see him making oil deals without even the country knowing, without the parliament being informed what transpired between the two parties, Uganda and the other parties that are signing these oil deals. They're doing all this to sell out Ugandan people. As long as the Rwandese get the billions from those companies that bribe them, as we've seen the Chinese businessman was trying to bribe Museveni for the oil deals. Fortunately, we thank President Trump's administration. They brought this Chinese to trial, and he's in jail. They brought this Chinese, Museveni and Kutesa, to trial. Of course, Kutesa and Museveni were absentee. They were absentees during this trial. Henceforth, anyone making deals with Museveni must know they are doing a disservice to the people of Uganda, and they are participating in a corrupted, non-indigenous Ugandan government of Rwandese Tutsi refugees. We call upon the UN, the African Union, to come to the defense of indigenous Ugandans. And in fact, Congolese. Because even Congo is still under control of Kabila, even though he has put a puppet leader, Tshisekedi. I'm learning from many Congolese contacts that Tshisekedi is the total puppet, because he even won the elections fraudulently. He did not win the election. The other group won the elections. But because of Museveni and Kabila, Rwanda, Kagame, Tshisekedi was put in power. So Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo are in total domination by the Rwandese Tutsi genocidaries that have trained militias to torture and kill indigenous Ugandans and Congolese. I always have to bring Congo in the picture because the suffering in Congo is directly from Rwandese Tutsi refugees that came from Uganda after usurping Uganda government, went to Rwanda, and then took over Congo. We see Museveni, he's trying to gain all sorts of support from foreign governments, foreign corporations, by giving them deals, corrupt deals, that are detrimental to Ugandan economic development. We see Museveni that all the people who have gone for training on oil technology are Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugees. With very few indigenous Ugandans. Most those who are indigenous Ugandans are the ones who are his agents or whose fathers are collaborators with the Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugee usurper of Uganda government. Having said that, we are also seeing what is happening in the ongoing elections. We see this man, Ruhakana, a minister in Museveni's government, who shot and killed one of the voters, or one of his competitors, or one of the supporters of his competitors at an election. What sort of people are we being ruled by? What sort of people are being ruled by? This man, in a normal democratic country, he'll be completely expelled, or he would be in jail. Be in jail and not be allowed to run for elections, especially after shooting at voters of his opposition and killing one of those supporters. Yet in Uganda, this is like normal. A culture of violence has been so instituted in everyday life of Uganda. It's like an institute now. Violence, you can go to learn violence in some institute. In Museveni's intelligence agencies, people are being taught all forms of torture, all forms of killings. In Museveni's government. To such a point that even children are affected. The Rwandese Tutsi refugees are trying to stay in power even after 35 years of killing, torturing, land grabbing indigenous Ugandan lands. Yet the whole world sits by and watches. And Britain, even America, even today, the last time when the corona first started, they even sent money to help Museveni supposedly pay to indigenous Ugandans. That money, the Ugandans didn't get it. We haven't heard what the American embassy, what did the American embassy report to President Trump? So the embassies themselves, American embassy, British embassy, foreign embassies, should be reporting to their governments about what is going on in Uganda. How can the American embassy should have said that they gave money to be disbursed to indigenous Ugandans? Yet indigenous Ugandans didn't get that money. Why did they report back to the Trump administration? So the American embassy, the British embassy, all foreign embassies in Uganda have some kind of responsibility to report to their respective countries and put full sanctions on the Rwandese, Burundian, Tutsi refugee, British neo-colonial puppet usurpers of Uganda government. I keep saying, we saw in Guyana, we saw in Suriname, African leaders in African Guyanese, African Surinamese were forced to hand over power to a very racist Indian opposition that now is killing Guyanese. Already there is turmoil in Guyana. And these African leaders, African Guyanese leaders, had not killed and tortured Indian people. So we see a kind of hypocrisy, double standards. When they want power taken from true indigenous or true African people in Guyana and Suriname, they come full force demanding that the people step down. But in Uganda, we haven't seen them demand that the Rwandese we haven't seen them demand that the Rwandese puppet refugees step down. After all, they are not Ugandans. They are usurpers of the Ugandan government. So where is Britain? Where is America? Where is the UN? Where is the African Union? We see even the head of the African Union is a puppet of the French. He fired a strong heroine, what I call a strong African woman, who condemned France for having demanded that those colonies that they controlled hand over all their bank reserve to France. And France has been taking $500 billion from these French puppet control leaders of the 14 former French colonies. This woman was fired by this man from Chad, the former Prime Minister of Chad, who obviously was a puppet of French. So we can see why even the African Union cannot have the Rwandese, Burundian Tutsis held accountable, because the leadership of the African Union is being headed by a Western puppet leader, a Western puppet chairman of the African Union. This information has to be shared among us Africans and among those good citizens of the world who realize the mistakes that have been made by Europe against African people. Because we get misinformation about why Africa is in the situation it is in. Africa is in the situation it is in because of European interference in African affairs. They keep putting dictators in Africa who have no concern for their people, who just betray their country and give corrupt deals, makes corrupt agreements with their former colonizers and other Western corporations. The situation is so dire in Uganda and Congo. Millions are perishing. Millions are starving because the British, the former American administrations, Israel, are bent on trying to rob Africa of its rich mineral resources and oil. Why can't you deal with Africans just like you're dealing with China, just like you're dealing with India? And yet these countries actually are your competitors. They want to be the leaders. We African people, we just want to live. We want to live in peace. Why can't Britain, America, and Israel say enough is enough? Let us stop supporting dictators in Africa. Let us stop supporting an insecure, dependent Rwandese, Burundian Tutsi refugee group that now is claiming to be Jewish. Stop it. Let the people of Africa have peace. Let us develop our countries. You have more to gain by having good economies in Africa, having good governments in Africa. Just like we see Britain, America, and Western countries have gained from having countries like Japan, which they had defeated, countries like Germany they had defeated, Korea that they control, having allowed these countries to have their own way of governance and their own way of economic development by giving them aid and supporting their development. But that's not happening in Africa. I've always been shocked to see why America supported China, moved all their industries to China. Many African Americans say because they didn't want African Americans to have jobs. And this was done by the Democratic government. And even the Republican. It's only Trump who has come and said, no, he'll bring back the jobs to America instead of China. I've always wondered, why would America give power, actually empower China, which now we see is America's competitor, to a point that they could be at war one of these days. They could be at war with each other. Yet they refuse to give that kind of help or that kind of aid or that kind of economic, bring about that kind of, or outsource those jobs to Africa. Because Africa as a whole, we are 1.3 billion people. In fact, many people are saying we are even more. We are 2 billion. Some people say 4 billion, which I tend to believe. Because I know when I lived in my country, many people didn't want to be counted. So the figure of 1.3 billion is way too low for the continent of Africa. So my question is, why can't these countries stop torturing Africa, stop outsourcing genocide to Africa through their puppets? Look at Biya, what he's doing in Cameroon. He's killing people. I've seen videos of him killing people, his own people, torturing people in the worst of ways. That's why I've come on this channel to say that I'm calling upon all the good citizens of the world to join African people, to join individuals like me, and find a solution for what is going on in Africa. We cannot continue to be killed by British, American, and Israeli puppet dictators, as we see in Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo. How can 15 million people have died and the whole Western world is keeping quiet? Museveni is continuing to kill people. Doesn't the Western world know that this man has stayed in power, fraudulently stayed in power, fraudulently won election for 35 years? How come they went to Guyana, where the African Guyanese had only been in power for 4 years, after the Indian racists had been ruling Guyana for 23 years, and having even committed genocide on Guyanese, having committed genocide on African Guyanese of over 1,000 people, and having turned Guyana into a drug transit center. Yet the Western world fought so hard to see these same Indian racists come back to power in Guyana. I warned you. I even been following the situation in Guyana. During the whole campaigns, during the whole warnings about, the government is trying to kill. This was a multiracial government which should be supported. Instead of supporting a multiracial African, Indian, mixed race, and natives, they supported a racist Indian opposition, which, as we see now already, young black men are being cut in pieces by some Indians. There's already killing. We see now already the so-called Indian government is haunting, practically witch hunting, the former government officials, which the former government officials of multiracial APNU and APNU and